Okay, I'm starting the recording. We're here today with Deb and Paul, and we are going to do a little street epistemology.
Okay, and our claim here is that transgenderism, or being transgender, is a mental illness. And the first thing we want to do is, first of all, clarify what your definition, doesn't matter anyone else's definition, what your definition of transgender is for this.
Someone who's born one gender and then over a course of years begins to believe that they're actually the opposite gender.
Okay, so they're born with all the sexual parts of one specific gender, but then they've come to believe that that is the wrong gender. Is that correct? Oh, there's Ian.
Come on in.
Sorry, I'm late.
We're just starting out.
We're doing a practice conversation with Paul. This is
okay,
Ian.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Yeah, me too.
Deb's questioning, and Paul's the interlocutor today.
What's the claim?
So the claim
We're
is
just getting into it.
Okay.
the claim is that transgenderism is a mental illness, and Paul is explaining his definition of a transgender person first of all, before we get into the confidence level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I want to be clear. I'm thinking that most are.
Right.
It's more. Yeah. To me, it's kind of analogous to, say, someone with anorexia identifies as a fat person, goes to see her doctor, and insists on being put on weight-reducing medication, or insists on liposuction. Is the medical community going to go along with that? No. However, a person can go into a doctor with male genitalia and the hormones that are appropriate to a male and say, well, I believe I'm a woman, and in the course of, some routine, is granted sex change surgery and hormone treatment. It's like, wow, why is it that the medical community is going along with one but not the other? Because the physical evidence is comparable in both, to me. And I just think the incidence of transgenderism has increased so much in the last few years that it seems to me to be more of a trend than an actual biological reality.
Okay. So you've also, in doing so, you have at least identified your definition here, which is there's a physical, physically male or female, and without any ambiguity about that, someone who thinks, no, it's the opposite. So let's talk about your confidence level in this being 100% that all people claiming to be transgender are not actually transgender, they're mentally ill, or 0% no. Everyone who considers themselves transgender is in fact born into the wrong body. What would your confidence level be on a scale of 0 to 100?
About 80.
80. So you think then that 80% of the people who are claiming to be transgender, probably it's more of a mental illness. So would that be correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
And using the term mental illness very loosely.
Right, yes.
It could be a 13-year-old girl who just wants to be dramatic.
Okay.
Or wants to freak out her parents.
But it's not an actual, we're not talking, you're saying that the top 20% then would be people who actually were born into the wrong body.
Yeah, and I think I think more like 10%.
Okay, so maybe okay.
Or 5.
Okay. So identify, clarify the confidence level. Let's see. Let's talk about the main reasons. So have you always felt this way?
Well, it hadn't really been that much of a consideration until the last 5 to 10 years, because it wasn't that prevalent. It just seems like it's garnered all kinds of attention. And so I'd say it's only been within the last 5 to 10 years. I remember hearing about Christine Jorgensen when I was a kid, sex change. I thought, wow, that's wild. And I believed it was probably medically necessary. But now it's like, oh my gosh, it seems like you go to a party in LA and every other parent is bragging about their transgender child.
So, and again, I don't want to put words in your
No,
mouth.
that's fine.
But I need you to, correct me if I am.
Sure.
So, are you saying that maybe it's less a factor of your beliefs have changed as you think that external factors have changed and that's why your confidence level?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
Okay. Clarify the main reasons. So, what do you think are the reasons why this is exploding? Or why have you come to believe that more and more people are, what's the word? I don't want to throw a word in there. Incorrect or deceived, or why their beliefs about who they are is.
Well, it seems like it's trendy. It garners a lot of attention in the media. It just seems like there's a lot of support around it. I think politically, socially, I just think there are ulterior reasons for people to claim to be transgender. And I've worked with clients who, like, I've mentioned girls, and I don't want to pick on girls, but it seems to happen more often with females. You know, like a 12-year-old girl who says she's a boy and really freaks out her parents. Everybody rallies around her. She gets a lot of attention for it. And then in time, she starts showing interest in having attention from boys. And I'll say, well, okay, that's really interesting. So you feel like you're a boy, and you're interested in boys. And she'll say, yeah, I'm a homosexual boy. It's like, okay, well, let's see where this goes. And over time, you know, she I think works through it, and then starts wearing makeup again and earrings, and starts identifying more as female. It's like, okay, so what was going on there? Was the biology changing? No. There were influences, more emotional, social influences that seemed to be prompting this behavior.
And this is in your personal experience and or clinical practice that you've come across this, or?
No personal experience,
Okay.
but in working with clients.
I'm sorry to interrupt. What do you do?
I'm a clinical social worker.
Okay, thank you. Just for my context.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And Ian, we are audio recording, just so you're aware.
thank you.
And this is group help, because I'm gonna need some help here, I'm running out of questions.
Okay, yeah, you're doing great.
Yeah.
So, if I could ask a question, one thing you mentioned was that you have seen a large growth in the rates of identification of transgender, right? So, how important is that to you in your belief that a lot of it is, I struggle to find the right word, but maybe illegitimate or not genuine or something like that? If let's choose a base rate of maybe 0.5% or something, right? If we're just sort of coasting steady at 0.5%, and we still saw the same sort of social movements around it, but I don't really know what the current rate of identification is. Let's throw out a number 5%, just for example's sake, right? If it coasted along at 0.5%, would you think that probably all of those people are probably genuine in their identification?
I'd be more inclined to believe that. Yeah.
More inclined. Okay.
Yeah.
So the growth in the community is a big part of the reason for your belief.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that some communities grow with awareness?
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, right, maybe there was a time when people were worried about the growth in ADHD diagnoses.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think there's any kind of parallels that we can draw with greater awareness, both on the part of parents and clinicians and things like that, to where we still have yet to find the right proportion of society that is probably affected?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, started graduate school in '82,
Mm-hmm.
so I've got a few years of observing this, and it's been interesting to see diagnoses becoming more popular
Mm-hmm.
or less popular.
Mm.
It's like, whoa.
And have you seen diagnoses becoming more popular?
Yeah, bipolar was much more in vogue.
Have you seen a greater prevalence in your own practice, or what criteria are you using to say that there's a growth happening?
The frequency with which people are diagnosed as bipolar. And
I'm actually going back to our original claim here. What evidence are you using to say there's growth, or there has been growth?
There's more transgender people
That there's more transgender
now
people
than
who are
there-
now identifying themselves. What evidence do you have? Is that your clinical experience, or is that, some sort of statistics?
yeah,
Or
that's a good question, because it's mostly impression based on media representation. I just am very suspicious of a couple that's getting featured on Morning Edition because they have a 5-year-old boy who now thinks he's a girl. And this couple is being regarded as heroic for defying social norms and honoring their 5-year-old's whimsical sense that he is actually a girl. It's like,
so would it be fair then to say that you're not necessarily sure that there is evidence showing that there's a growth, but that the media coverage seems to give you the impression that there's a growing rate? Would that be a fair statement?
that's very fair.
Okay.
I need to look into that.
There was one.
I mean, I don't know the truth or not, but
No,
yeah.
but it's a great
Sure.
question.
Yes.
Yeah. There was one other question I wanted to ask to kind of explore. Earlier you used the example of an anorexic seeking diet medication or something, right? I think that that's a pretty clear example of a medical intervention which would be harmful. If you actually gave someone who's anorexic, stimulants or something to reduce their appetite, we can agree it would be disastrous,
Yeah.
right? Do you think that if we were to look at the outcomes of, what is sometimes called gender affirmative care, right? And if we could see that it reduces suicidality or, self-reports of distress or things like that, would that evidence be meaningful to you? Would you, or if we found that there's very little difference, then would that also confirm, like how important would that information be to you?
Very. I think that's a great question.
Sure.
Yeah, it's like it's interesting. It would be interesting to look at on both sides. Does the gender change decrease suicidality or depression, or does it increase? It's like,
I have too many opinions on this topic, so
Hit me with your best shot.
I can't talk about it right now.
okay,
Yeah.
that's fair. That's fair.
But I do have a question. What would you, how could you tell the difference between a transgender person with a mental illness versus a genuine transgender person? Because you were saying maybe 80% might be mentally ill and then the 20 genuine. How could you figure out where that line is? Like if they're genuine versus...
Yeah, that's tough. And again, I want to clarify, by mentally ill, all I'm saying is motivated by ulterior things, not... Anyway.
Do you, I just want to make very clear in that claim, do you feel like it is a conscious ulterior motive, or do you think that it might be an unconscious sort of, drive for, you mentioned attention a number of times, how it can garner a lot of attention from people surrounding the person, right? Do you think it's always a strategic decision, or maybe like less consciously pursued. You know what I mean?
I think both.
Okay.
Yeah. Good question.
So is there anything you could learn that would change your mind
Yeah.
about this?
Oh, absolutely.
What would that be?
I
I mean, you talked about the what were you-
Clinical outcomes.
Mhm.
yeah, right.
Suicidality
That would
and
be great.
rates of depression with the treatment, the gender affirming treatments. But is there something that you would look at and consider?
Oh yes, yes. Yeah, I throw this out there just because that's something I've been thinking about.
Yeah.
And back to the confidence level. In answering 80%, I was thinking, my impression is that 80% of the people that are claiming to be transgender probably aren't, but are just looking for some kind of validation or whatever. But my certainty level, oh no, I don't have that. So I don't know. I guess I have to distinguish confidence from certainty.
Yeah, the scale kind of tipped towards the
Yeah.
percentage of genuine versus.
Yeah, I actually wanted to, I didn't comment in the moment, but just a piece of maybe constructive feedback is that I kind of felt like when we did the confidence scale, we did it as what percent do you think are real versus not real, but sort of almost implied in that is that a certain amount of certainty about whether, like, if you say 80% are real and 20 are not real, then it kind of says that you're almost very certain about that non-real identification exists, right? Whereas I almost feel like the scale might have been like, I don't. It's hard to do, right?
Yeah,
Do you see where I'm going with that?
Right.
Like, we kind of boxed you into a certain amount of confidence in a presupposed position by asking that particular confidence scale.
Right.
I don't know.
And the original claim was transgenderism is a mental illness or a mental disorder. And the 80-20 was not a confidence on that claim, right? It was
Right.
just a distinction of how many are genuine.
Sure.
Right.
How many are mentally ill? 80%.
And that's just an impression. So I guess
So
the
the
confidence
confidence
level
level.
would be low.
So you have low confidence that transgenderism is a mental disorder?
Yeah, I'd say it's an impression that I have. Would I assert that that's true? In very, very rare circumstances, like for the purpose of this conversation, it's like I'll throw it out there.
Yeah.
Because that's my impression.
So you could be 50% maybe, like you could go either way.
Oh, yeah.
When you learn more information, you could become less confident that it's a mental disorder or more confident.
Well, yeah, and again, I absolutely believe that there are some people who are legitimately needing, sex change. I don't doubt that at all.
How would you determine which ones
Are and aren't.
legitimately need it versus
Right.
just out for attention?
Yeah, and I don't know. I think that really requires pretty intensive therapy. Because how do we know about ourselves?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think this is my personal opinion coming in, but as I've always identified as a woman, I've always felt like a woman, so it's really hard for me to try to understand how somebody else could feel on the inside different than the genitalia they're born with. Like, so how do you overcome that hurdle of getting to acceptance to where you can say, okay, I understand you feel like that. And it's an inside thing. There's, like, for anorexia, there are tests you can do. There's all kinds of physiological, measurable things that you could look at. And yes, it is something that in their minds that's making them feel like this body dysmorphia. But there are also physiological things that are physically dangerous that need treatment as well. So I don't know where I'm going with this. I'm just lecturing now. So I'm sorry. But I think it's a really good topic to explore, and I'm really glad you brought it up, actually. And what about, this is not really a good street epistemology question, but the concept of gender fluidity, have you looked into that at all?
That's it, yeah. I mean, I believe everybody's on the scale
Mm-hmm.
between masculine and feminine.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know what gender fluidity would be as opposed to masculinity, femininity.
Well, and by gender, I just mean the social idea of masculine and feminine, the clothing, makeup, hairstyles, the way you present yourself, and that gender, not sex.
Okay. Well, I definitely think that's fluid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's just how you feel on the inside, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm pretty comfortable being a male and haven't wanted to experiment with anything else. But
Mm-hmm.
I know people who do. And
Right.
get some real gratification from kind of like the role play or just the expression of
Yeah.
a more feminine side.
Maybe that's how they feel.
Mm-hmm.
If they sometimes feel more masculine, sometimes feel more feminine,
One-
leaning one way or another. Yeah, go ahead.
One of the things I really wish is that in the consideration of transgenderism, that people not think in binary terms.
Mm-hmm.
Think, okay, you're born with male genitalia, you feel like a woman, okay, be that person. Why give up the male genitalia just because you feel like a woman? I mean, it's like it's this categorization, this dichotomy. It's like, why does this dichotomy exist in this consideration when, on the other hand, people are considering non-binary, you know?
Right.
Yeah, there is we're kind of departing street epistemology now, but
Yes,
Yeah,
we're throwing in opinions.
That was
and-
my fault, yeah.
It is interesting to me. I think that this, I don't know because I'm not very well versed in like feminist literature, but this actually maps to two different waves of feminism, right? So like, you know, we used to hear a lot that the phrase the gender binary used to get thrown around a lot as something that we should oppose, right? This idea that your biological sex ought not have any implication for the ways that you are allowed to present yourself in society or dress or professions that you have, right?
Right.
But it is interesting to me that at least in the very specific cases of trans men and trans women, right, there are trans people who identify as something other than man or woman, but I don't really know much about that, right? So I'm not including them for the purposes of this characterization, but it is interesting to me in which the way in which trans women and trans men do seem to rely on strengthening a gender binary of sorts, right? That like, I don't know how to express this, but like the ability for there to be, you know, the capacity for there to be a mismatch between your biological sex and your gender presentation presupposes the idea that there is some correct
Yes.
presentation for your sex, right?
Exactly.
So,
And that's
anyway.
usually cultural,
Yeah,
right? And
Yeah.
based on where you're raised and
Right.
the country you're in.
yeah,
Yeah.
When you go to Target, there's the pink section of clothing and
Right.
the blue section. Toys. So imagine you're who you are right now, but you have a female body. How would you feel?
that's actually a good SE question, I feel like.
I think,
I don't know. Kind of
I
explore.
could give you a locker room response. How would it feel?
After the first couple hours, and you're bored of.
After, yeah.
And now you have to go to work, and you have to go hang out with your parents, and you have to go to Walmart. And there's all the things that people do. But now you look like a woman, but you still have your same feelings on the inside.
I don't really get the question well enough. I understand what you're asking me, but it's like, it's hard to put myself in that and respond.
Because I think from the trans people that I've had discussions with, sometimes it's like that. They just feel like they're in the wrong body. They should have the other sex characteristics. So it becomes really difficult.
Yeah, I cannot imagine a greater challenge to be born with than to have people see someone different from whom you know you are. And when I first became aware of transgendered people, when I was like, I don't know, 10, 12, something like that, Renee, somebody, a tennis player, I never questioned whether or not she was legitimately who she felt that she was. And it's only recently that I have gotten evidence, unvetted evidence, that there actually may be people out there who perhaps because it's become socially acceptable, may be jumping into this belief. They haven't had all of their life, but they're jumping into this belief, and wow, the consequences of moving ahead very quickly with that can be devastating. But I also know that we've got Larissa in Evanston, who is, well, she's 60 years old, and there weren't many choices, you know, and she is a tall, big, burly woman, and it is also a shame that something could not have been done earlier to make her appear more like who she believes that she is.
So, I don't know who she is.
Well, I mean, it's not that she's famous, it's just that Evanston is a small town, and so we all know Larissa.
Okay.
And she's obviously a trans woman. And she's, you know, completed all of her surgeries, but she looks manly. And she didn't have any other choices, you know, when she was younger, and maybe been able
Not
to.
okay.
Yes.
So you lead this double life trying to pretend to be somebody you're not.
I don't know how long she's been, you know, out there.
Yeah, so you're citing her as an example of someone who really would have benefited from the hormone treatment early on.
Absolutely, absolutely. And oh man, I don't know, you know, at what point in time you take a young person who's not who's still a minor and say, okay, we need to move in this direction so that you're not. I don't like the word compromise, but so that, you know, you can mature into.
You do pass a point of no return at a certain point.
Yes,
right?
you do
Where,
pass a point of no
if you start
return.
young, especially.
or if you don't do anything at all.
Yes.
Right? Larissa passed a point of no return in her development where the changes to her body cannot be undone to make her more physically in line with her self-conceptualization, right?
Yeah.
So it's very difficult that way for both branches, treatment and no treatment.
And I guess at that point in time, I just say that, you know, if people are convinced, I'm gonna step out of their way and let them, if it's a mistake, let them make the mistake, but it's their choice. And I hope that they're not making a horrible
what's
mistake.
on the inside.
Yes.
And you can't say you don't feel like that.
Yeah.
Or you'll grow out of it. It's just a
But again,
phase.
I just can't think of any, and I hope you don't find this word offensive, birth defect, anything where nature has intervened in a way that that nature's made a mistake. I can't think of anything that would be a bigger challenge to have to live through.
Yeah.
And if you look at the suicide rates and attempted suicide rates and depression and anxiety rates of LGBT kids, particularly in Utah, it's crazy high. So
I suppose that you could go to different states that are varying in terms of their political climate and find a correlation.
Oh, I'm sure you could. I'm sure you could. But
like in California, it's not that big of a deal. Like
Right.
Everybody's got
Right.
some, and there's a lot of gender affirming options there. I don't know. I know there's more here in Utah. Like it's growing, but it's still really limited and really frowned upon. And there's a lot of harassment and a lot of if you're not passing enough, which breaks my heart for these kids
Mm-hmm.
and adults.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh.
So, and it's case by case. Like every human is
Yeah.
different. So, what works for one person is not going to work for the other. And this kid here is gender fluid, doesn't really identify as male or female. This kid over here, when they turned 12 and hit puberty, started developing breasts and was like, "Holy shit, what are we doing here? Like, I hate this. Like, this is not me. I don't want this." And maybe go back and forth. Like, there's no right way to be a trans or wrong way. Hey, there's my boyfriend. We're going out for lunch. Anyways, I'm gonna turn this off.
So we got far
Because
more
this
into personal
It's not
discussions at the
street
end.
epistemology
Yes.
anymore.
Well,
But this is really interesting.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah,